Boston College needs to do these things in order to beat Michigan State in the Red Bandana Game.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It's the Red Bandana Game this weekend. Boston College and Michigan State on Saturday at 8 p.m. at Alumni Stadium. A big sellout crowd is expected at Alumni. Weather is up in the air right now. But we're going to be talking about this game, giving previews and predictions. And to join me, as always on Friday, is Eagle Insider writer Mitchell Wolf. Mitch, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm excited that I'm going to be back in the building for the first time since 2021. They lost to NC State, which it might have been a Red Bandana game too, but I know that they had a Red Bandana away at UMass that year, but I can't remember if this was a Red Bandana game too.
I don't think so. Wasn't that the Virginia Tech game that year? Was that the same year? Or is that?
Yes, no. You're right. You're absolutely right. It was that. Yep, you're right.
With Jacoby came back?
Yes.
All right. So this game, though, 2-1 Boston College against 3-0 Michigan State. Let's talk a little bit about just the setup of this game. What are your initial thoughts going into Saturday's matchup?
My thoughts are that I think this is going to be a very good opportunity for BC to get back to what they want to do on both sides of the ball, especially on offense, because looking at Michigan State's statistics and tape, this team is undefeated, but their 2 wins against FBS opponents have each been by a field goal. They had to come back to beat Maryland. They had one really amazing play. But they've got some big gaping holes. Defense, I would say their defense is pretty strong overall, but their offense is kind of all over the place. And that'll probably be even more so the case this week, given some of the injury murmurings we're hearing on that side. So I think this is a chance for BC's defense to kind of rebound after a tough, we can quibble about, how bad was it, but after a tough outing, regardless, against Missouri, against a pretty good offense. And then the offense needs to kind of get back on the horse in terms of consistency and being able to move the ball on every drive and ideally, threaten to put points on the board.
So you mentioned Michigan State injuries. The murmurings are around their star wide receiver, Nick Marsh. But what about Aidan Chiles? Who is this quarterback, and what have you seen out of him in the film so far?
Yeah, Aidan Chiles is a very interesting player because, he's a very highly touted prospect, goes to Oregon State, plays a little bit last year behind BJ Uiagalelei. Kind of I don't want to say a Taysom Hill type, but they bring him in to add some mobility to the offense. But he's clear he has a very live arm and is going to develop into something. And then this year, started off pretty rough, a lot of turnovers, a lot of risky plays. He didn't do that as much against Prairie View A&M, but that's an FCS game, so it's to be expected. But the guy can really spin it. He had a 77-yard touchdown that he threw about 55 yards in the air on a post route to Marsh on a dot. That was really impressive. But if he's the kind of quarterback that it's kind of like Castellanos last year, where if you kind of get him holding onto the ball too long and outside the pocket, he's going to run around and sometimes make a really dumb mistake. He's had, I think, 4 interceptions so far this year. He's thrown 2 in each of the first 2 games, against Prairie View A&M, obviously. And he's had a few fumbles and kind of taken some bad sacks here and there. So, you think about a guy like that, he's a first-year starter on the road in the Red Bandana Game, against a veteran defensive coordinator like Tim Lewis. This should be a pretty good recipe for BC's defense to have some success.
So this has to be a get-right game for BC. You're looking at this team. They had 2 turnovers. One of them was a bad interception. The other one was just a bad throw. What are your thoughts of what BC has to do to win this game?
I think they need to get back to running the ball and not that they, purposely really went away from it or, chose to go away from it against Missouri. They kind of had to just because of how the game was developing. By the time they got the ball back in the second half, they're down by 10 points, and they kind of just need to throw to get back in the game. So that makes sense. But the thing about that game that confused me was, I went back and watched the tape after the episode where we talked and looked at some of the numbers, and maybe they weren't doing it as much as I thought, but they were still running a lot of, lateral running concepts, especially with Kai Robichaux, not really taking advantage of his skill set as best as they could. And yeah, and again, BC's offensive line got beat up in the trenches. There's really no other way to put that. So they have to play better individually. But I mean, Will Loing can also call a better game in terms of calling more man gap concepts that have pullers, get the running back downhill, don't have him reading as much, trying to make multiple cuts. That's not really Kai Robichaux's style. Treshaun Ward's a little better at that, but um, so you can do it a little bit with him, but don't do it with as much with Robichaux. And on offense, I think as long as they can run the ball more, then they can incorporate more play action, incorporate more RPOs, and instead of having to just do the standard drop back game, which again, to Castellanos' credit, I thought he did a pretty good job of considering circumstances. Outside of the 2 interceptions, the one terrible mistake, he admits it. Second one, just trying to make a play down a few scores and makes a throw that he thought he could make and he couldn't. But a lot of impressive throws over the middle. Had some opportunities there that didn't go his way. So you can see that it's there. But I think that Bill O'Brien and Will Long, they don't want that to be the identity of the offense. They want the identity to be running the ball, control the clock, and not have to put the entire game on Castellanos' shoulders. And I think they kind of did that a bit last week, obviously because of how the game developed, but also because you need against a better, more talented team, you need your best playmakers to go out there and make plays. Against a team like Michigan State that I think at best is about on par with BC and maybe a little worse. You don't need to put it on him. You can rely on your other playmakers, really on both sides of the ball, to go out and keep this game competitive.
Now, speaking of the other side of the ball, Donovan Ezeiruaku, I know you've been singing his praises. What have you seen out of him like so far? Like, what is during camp, I thought he played like he had his hair on fire. That was the kind of how I described it. It seems like it's kind of carried over a little bit into the season.
I think he's just really just developed into such a smart player who's just played so much football that he has so many tools in his bag to be able to go in and defeat offensive tackles. And last week, obviously BC's run defense starts off pretty rough, and not really because of him, because a lot of what he was doing is he was doing his job of what I would say is blunting the tip of the spear of the outside zone, where basically you're just resetting the edge so that the running back can't get out around the edge, and you force the cutback, and he did that job. The problem was the rest of the defense didn't as much in the first half. The second half, they got it together with more defenders in the box. But you saw him a few times, try to knife inside, which had mixed results. Sometimes it worked. On the final third down conversion by Brady Cook, it didn't, because he knifed inside and Cook went outside. So you kind of take that as you will, because he can make so many plays with it otherwise. And as a pass rush, he still hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities. Just to he got the sack against Missouri, but something that I'm looking at is, teams are really, really trying to get the ball out quickly against BC. In the last 2 weeks, Duquesne and Missouri have really tried to do that. They're not giving the pass rush much time to even get there. And when they have gotten pressure, they've gotten it pretty quickly. So, those teams are smart about doing that. The interesting thing about Michigan State is that their offense is so kind of, I would say, traditional. It's, under tons of under center. I think they run the 4th or 5th most under center snaps in the college football, besides the service academies and maybe one other team. I can't remember which one. Don't run a lot of RPOs, not a ton of screens. It's just like traditional play action, throw the ball over the middle of the field stuff. And that requires a guy like Aidan Chiles to hold on to the ball a long time. And that's something that, that can help BC's pass rush. It also helps that his tackles have been pretty poor in pass protection, especially the left tackle. I am interested to see how they play him and Nito Paula, because they have shown a willingness to kind of go different ways with that. Against Florida State, I think Ezeiruaku was mostly playing on the weak side, on the left tackle. Last 2 games has been more on the strong side. So I think that the matchup is easier for him as a pass rusher on the left side, but I think they might want to have him play on the right to better, again, take away the run game, and then let a guy like Neto Paula have an easier matchup there in the passer situations. And Ezeiruaku can get home, as we've seen, basically against anybody.
All right. In our second segment, I want to talk about this game itself. Who on the Boston College side needs to have a big game in order for BC to win? We'll get into all of that in just a moment. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. With superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only, available to U.S. customers. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here, and I'm joined by Mitchell Wolf of Eagle Insider. And we are talking about this upcoming game on Saturday. It's the Red Bandana Game. Now, if you're a college football video game fan of NCAA football, the Red Bandana uniforms were just released in the latest patch of the video game, so you can go check that out if you're interested in that. But the game itself is this weekend, and Mitch and I are both going to be in different spots on the field. So Mitch, if you don't know, doesn't live around this area, and he's going to be visiting and actually being a fan in this game, and I'm going to be up in the press box. But we're going to both be enjoying this game. And Mitch, who are some players you're going to be looking for to have a big game in this one?
Well, we talked about a few. We talked about Donovan Ezeiruaku and Thomas Castellanos obviously need to have big games. I think the running backs in general need to have a big game. It'll be kind of interesting to see who kind of breaks out as the guy. Michigan State, in terms of their defense, runs a little more base defense, so you might see them try to use Treshaun Ward a little more to get some speed against a defense with 3 or 4 linebackers on the field as opposed to 5 defensive backs. The offensive line in general needs to have a lot better of a game. And I think, luckily, it seems like Jude Bowery avoided injury, which is great. He's practicing this week, which is good. Logan Taylor is back after, he had a pretty rough game against Missouri. Hope that, back at home, he can play a little better. And, as he's moved further from injury and feeling more comfortable, he can play better. On defense, the absence of Nick Marsh, I really think cannot be overstated for Michigan State, and then, what BC needs to do, because looking at the rest of their offense, I just don't really see a dynamic receiving threat that's established themselves this year. They got Jack Velling to come over from Oregon State. He had an all Pac-12 second-team season for them last year, but he just hasn't really done a lot. So they are the receivers, Montori Foster, who has been, he's okay. He's fine. So I think you basically cover him with Mari Jackson, and they've got some young guys that maybe could do some stuff, but they're just unproven at this point. So it's hard to say, what you do with your defense. So it's almost more complicated of a defensive game plan for a guy like Tim Lewis, because with Marsh out there, it's like, okay, we're gonna orient our entire game plan around this guy. He's their number one threat. We can't let him beat us. And now you're kind of just looking at a bunch of guys like, okay, well, I guess we can just kind of play our defense however we want to. So I think that special teams will be very interesting in this game, because I would say that Michigan State has a very good, consistent kicker and punter, and that's something that BC's kicker has kicked a lot of extra points, but that's about it. Punting has been horrific. So, in a game that, might come down to a lot of, close possessions and stuff like that, special teams will be extremely important. I think one thing that is also really important is how BC handles turnovers, and specifically when their defense forces turnovers, because looking at Michigan State, I think it's fair to assume that they'll probably at least have one, maybe two. And I think it's imperative that the offense takes advantage of those opportunities, ideally if they give some favorable field position where they can turn those drives into points, because I think that BC's offense is going to try to minimize the number of possessions and time of possession for Michigan State. So if they get those extra possessions via turnover, if they can turn those into field goals or even touchdowns, that'd be fantastic. They can basically put Michigan State in the position that a team like Florida State was a few weeks ago, where they have to throw the ball to come back, and then that forces them to kind of play out their element, because Jonathan Smith wants to run the ball, wants to run play action. If he has to do the standard drop back game that BC did last week against Missouri, then they're going to be out of their element on offense, and that can make things even worse for them.
Now, let's talk about the penalties a little bit more for Michigan. Second to last in the country, right?
Yeah, so second to most penalties per game. I think it's 9.97. Let me find the number here.
110 yards per game.
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty rough for them. Yeah, 10.67 penalties per game and 97.67 penalty yards per game. It's just, it's been bad. The first game it was a lot of defense penalties. Last game's been offense. So you got to think that them coming to a hostile road environment, BC is going to be at a fever pitch in a night game. So a lot of noise. Having a new right guard on the offensive line. I think it's Dallas Fincher is going to be playing there. Some new receivers playing more. You got to think that crowd's going to force some stuff, and if they can, keep committing penalties to put them in bad situations, that's obviously huge for BC. And again, BC needs to take advantage of that. You can't let them convert out of those situations. You can't, commit penalties and that give them freebies, because then they might be able to take advantage of it. So, if BC, as long as they stay disciplined, do what they've been doing the last few games in terms of penalties, that should, keep them on schedule on offense and not give Michigan State freebies. And ideally, some mistakes by the Spartans can, put them behind the chains and allow BC to play more aggressively on, third and long when they've gotten backed by a holding penalty, and then BC can just pin their ears back and try to get after the quarterback.
So I want to ask one more before we get to our predictions in the last segment. I want to get into the punting piece. So BC's used 3 punters so far: Ivan Zvanko, Sam Stone, and Sam Candotti. And this week, Bill O'Brien says that basically they got to fix it. But if they don't, he's willing to just scrap punting. What do you think he meant by that? Is it kind of just going back to what Halfley did last year?
I think so. Honestly, like that's what it would indicate to me. It's putting a lot on your defense. I think maybe especially with the guy like Nick Marchette, maybe they feel more comfortable, putting their defense in tough situations. But and a huge part of that is running the ball. That's why BC was so effective using that strategy last year, was because they could get into third and short situations so consistently and usually convert out of third and short. And if they couldn't get it on third and short, they could usually get it on fourth and even shorter. So, maybe that means using more designed runs with Thomas Castellanos, getting some extra offensive linemen on the field to, get some extra oomph when they want to run the ball, and probably going to run the ball with the quarterback there. Just get the ball Castellanos as quick as possible and have him try to dive forward for the extra yard to get the conversion. And, again, that's I think basically, if you look at it this way, if you think that, okay, if we punt, we're hoping to get, 30 to 35 yards to flip the field, at some point is that, kind of a moot point. You wonder where it's okay, is if we give it to them on our 35, that we risk that on a 4th and 2, let's say, is that just as bad as giving it to them on their own 30? So I'm sure there's some kind of calculus with that they're working on, but I mean, it'd be a pretty interesting game plan. And again, it's putting a lot of stress on the defense, but in a game where they're going to have all the emotional support of a huge crowd behind them, you hope that your defense can come through. And get a team like Michigan State that struggles with turnover penalties, maybe you can mitigate that risk by them shooting themselves in the foot with penalties and turnovers.
All right, in a moment, Mitch and I are going to give our predictions for this game. Are we both going to pick the Eagles? You'll have to wait and find out in just a moment. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel here at Locked On Boston College. It's America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. I love their parlays. They have, you can get, passing yards and the spread and, receiving yards, and especially in the NFL. I think they don't have it anymore for college, but you can get all of that on FanDuel.
They do.
Now,
They do for this game. They've got all kinds of vault lines for Thomas Castellanos, Jaden Skeet. They had the Marsh lines earlier. They've got all kinds of stuff for this game.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that game, because I'm in Massachusetts, Mitch is outside of Mass, so he can see that stuff. I can't. So, but with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season and Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. This is Locked On BC. AJ Black joined by Mitch Wolf, and we're giving our predictions here. But after this episode, first of all, I got to apologize. I was supposed to do a crossover episode with the Locked On Spartans guy, and I was supposed to record last night. We had an issue with timing. Today, my car, the Mass Pike was closed, so it took me an extra hour and a half to get home. That was fun, so I missed that, and so it just never happened. I apologize. You'll get your postcast with me tomorrow, so I apologize for not being able to get that episode. I told you I was going to do a crossover, just never got it done. But when you're done with this episode, check out Locked On ACC. They did another group episode that's up on our feed. Check that out when you're done with today's episode. It's a great episode to check out. Now, Mitch, I'll let you go first here. What is your predictions for this game?
I think BC should win this game by multiple scores, pretty much going away. I think that the lessons learned from last week are going to be really important on both sides of the ball. I think that Bill O'Brien is the right type of coach to properly instill those lessons. I'm going to write about this in my preview piece coming up, but if this were, some of the previous coaches, I'd be very concerned about a letdown spot here. B2B team kind of taking the wrong message away from a close loss to an SC program, and they'd be like, "Oh, we can kind of just coast to a win here," even though it is a Red Bandana game, which obviously kind of swings things in BC's favor a bit. But I think that I think that BC, the Bel Air is going to be upset, angry about how last game went, and they're going to kind of take that out of Michigan State. So I'm going to go with a final score of 28-17.
Ooh, you got very similar to what I have. There's a few things about this game that I have in my bucket of why BC is going to come back, and I think the emotions of the Red Bandana game. I think this is a big game for the entire team, and it's been, I think, drilled into them all week long for the Red Bandana piece with Welles Crowther and all of that, which obviously is very special. But once they hit Alumni Stadium, there's going to be 45,000 people screaming. That's going to hit it to a new level. I thought last week against Missouri could have been a game Thomas Castellanos took over. I feel like this game is prime for him to have a huge game. And I think it's going to be all predicated on the run. I think they're going to run the ball a lot, as you said, with Treshaun Ward and Kai Robichaux. But I think once they get that going, it's going to open up some stuff for Castellanos, especially in the pass game. I think they're going to get some passes going. And then defensively, I think this is going to be another big game for BC. So we're like two peas in a pod here. I got BC winning this one, 31-17 over Michigan State.
That was actually my original one, but then I was like, I'll kind of keep this bit of not keeping field goals going. But I do agree with you. I think that Tommy is going to be very big in the run game in this one. I think it'll be interesting with Michigan State's defense. They also play a ton of zone coverage, which is what Missouri did last week, dropping a lot of guys into zone to prevent Tommy from passing. And again, aside from the 2 interceptions, I thought he did a pretty good job navigating that. But I also think they're going to say, hey, you can go out, let's go out and if you don't see it, then go out and run. Let's go make a play. Let's have you get out there. And I think this is going to be a big game for the defense for sure. I think, for some guys, guys like Cam Horsley, Donovan Ezeiruaku, Cam Arnold, who have been here a long time, this is ostensibly their final Red Bandana game. So you got to think they're going to show out, get some big turnovers, and then ideally the offense can turn those into points, and BC can kind of go into the fourth quarter of this one up by multiple scores and not have to, make it stressful for me and the other 47,000 people that'll be there in the fourth quarter.
All right, Mitch, we're gonna end this episode. Where can people find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Check out my work on Eagle Insider. And also, if you have a tailgate this Saturday and you want me to come through, shoot me a DM on Twitter. My friends, my roommates from college don't live in Boston much anymore, so I'm kind of lost for a tailgate spot. So I'm just going to be kind of a nomad roaming around, checking in with people. So if you got to you want me to come through, you want to tell me my takes are terrible, I'll come through and I'll listen to what you have to say. So hit me up on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. And let's have a great Saturday. I'm very excited to be back in Chestnut Hill.
All right. And yep, I will be there as well. I will be doing professional work up in the
I will not of any kind.
That's me next week. I will be I'll be attending the game next week, but this week I'll be up in the press box. So check me out on Twitter at AJBlack247 and go over to Eagle Insider. I will have play-by-play analysis throughout the game. Make sure we check out all our work over on Eagle Insider. Hit the subscribe button on Locked On Boston College on YouTube, but also the Locked On Boston Postcast. I will be going live from the press box after the game, after the press conference as well, to talk the game and give my analysis but it's on Locked On Boston Postcast. So check that out as well. Make sure you hit the subscribe button there. Again, we'll see you all again on Locked On BC on Sunday with Mitch. It will be out on Monday, but we'll talk about the game, everything in between. Thank you all. We'll see you all again soon. For Mitch, this is AJ. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day.